Right now, shipping a container across the Pacific costs a fraction of what it did at the peak. Some rates are down nearly 90%, but at the store, your grocery bill hardly budges. If shipping costs are falling so fast, why isn't anything cheaper? The answer hides in contracts, in inventory slowdowns, and in a pricing maze that keeps the savings out of your cart. Where does that money actually go, and what needs to change before you see relief? Look at the numbers, and the story jumps off the page. In 2021 and 2022, shipping a 40-foot container, the kind that holds everything from televisions to sneakers, cost importers as much as $20,000 on the busiest routes. That spike rewrote budgets and forced tough choices because the world's supply chain was running hot and short on space. But then, as demand cooled and new ships stacked up at anchor, the price collapsed. By early 2026, that same container could cross the Pacific for about $1,400. That is a drop of more than 90% from the peak, a swing so steep it looks like a mountain and a cliff on any freight chart. The industry tracks these prices using container units. A TEU is a 20-foot box, about the size of a pickup truck bed. A FEU is 40 feet, like 2 truck beds end to end. Most consumer goods move in FEU containers, and these numbers set the tone for global trade. When the cost of moving a container falls from $20,000 to $1,400, it is not just a statistic, it is a seismic shift in how goods move around the world. The fall was swift, not gradual. Charts from Drury and Freightos show the line racing up and then plunging back down, with only brief bumps from disruptions along the way. That kind of volatility grabs headlines and makes people expect prices at home to tumble just as fast. But the reality, as we will see, is much more complicated. Spot rates grab headlines because they swing wildly from week to week. They are the prices importers pay if they need shipping space right now, like buying a last-minute plane ticket. But most goods do not move on these walk-up prices. Instead, importers and freight forwarders negotiate contract rates that lock in pricing for months at a time, sometimes a year or more. These contracts are settled after rounds of bids and meetings, often during the first half of the year, and they rarely adjust on the fly. So even when spot rates collapse, many companies are still paying last season's rates until their contracts reset. One importer put it plainly, "We are still paying double what the spot market says because our contract runs through June." That means the drop in shipping costs takes time to filter through the system. Contracts offer stability, but they also slow down any relief when the market turns in your favor. Even when those lower contract rates finally arrive, the impact on shelf prices is smaller than most people expect. For a typical household product, ocean freight makes up just a sliver of the final price, often only a few cents on every dollar. The rest comes from manufacturing, packaging, trucking, warehousing, insurance, and the store's own costs. So a dramatic drop in ocean freight might save a retailer $1 or $2 per item at most, and sometimes just pennies. That is not enough to spark a price war in the aisle. Retailers often use those savings to rebuild margins or to offset other rising expenses rather than cut prices right away. The logic is simple. Price tags move when competition forces their hand, not just because one cost goes down. Warehouses across the country are still working through pallets stacked high with goods ordered months ago, back when shipping costs were much higher. Retailers filled their storage spaces early, trying to outmaneuver supply chain chaos and avoid running out of stock. Now, even as ocean freight rates have dropped, those older, more expensive shipments are still sitting on shelves or in back rooms, waiting to be sold. Until that inventory moves, the lower cost of new shipments cannot make its way into the price tag shoppers see. The journey from factory to checkout is not quick. After a retailer books space on a container ship, the goods might spend weeks at the port, then another few weeks crossing the ocean. Once they arrive, they are unloaded, sorted, and sent by truck or train to distribution centers, then finally to stores. From the moment a shipment is booked to the day it reaches the shelf, 3 to 6 months can pass. Sometimes longer if there is a backup at any step along the way. A port operations manager put it bluntly. We are still unloading containers that were paid for at last year's prices. That pipeline acts like a sponge, soaking up cost changes and releasing them only slowly. Even after lower shipping rates reach the warehouse, other costs like labor, rent, and domestic transport hold firm. These expenses rarely fall, even when ocean freight does. The result is a slow drip, not a flood, of savings. Price relief gets absorbed by the system before it ever has a chance to reach the checkout lane. A container ship makes headlines when its price drops from $10,000 to $1,400. But inside that 40-foot box, the math tells a quieter story. That single container, called an FEU in industry shorthand, can carry about 1,200 drip coffee makers, each boxed and stacked to fill every inch. When freight rates were at their peak, just the ocean journey alone added around $8 to the cost of each coffee maker. Now, with rates reported around $1,400 per container, that same trip adds just over $1 per unit. The savings per coffee maker? Roughly $7 before the product even reaches a warehouse. But by the time it is on a store shelf, after packaging, trucking, warehousing, and retail markup, the drop in shipping cost shrinks to a handful of cents, sometimes as little as a dime or a quarter on a $30 item. One shopper scanning a receipt summed it up with a shrug. 7 cents? That is not even enough for a gumball. Container shipping lines poured more than 10 million TEUs of new capacity into the water between 2023 and 2026, enough to expand the global fleet by nearly a third. But when the world's appetite for imports cooled, all those extra ships started chasing fewer bookings. That is overcapacity, too many vessels, and not enough cargo. Rates do not just drift lower, they tumble as carriers compete for business. At the same time, global routes play a hidden role. When conflict or piracy flares in the Red Sea, ships detour thousands of miles around Africa. Each reroute ties up vessels for weeks, tightening supply and pushing spot rates up, even on far-off routes. As those disruptions faded in late 2025, ships returned to their usual lanes, and capacity flooded back in. A carrier spokesperson put it this way: when the Red Sea reopened, it was like someone opened a valve. Suddenly, there was space everywhere. The result was clear. Prices dropped fast, not just on one route, but across the map. Shipping is a global game of musical chairs, and when more chairs show up, the music changes for everyone. Retailers have choices when costs fall, and the first move is not always a price cut. A pricing manager at a national chain described it this way: when our freight bill drops, we use that room to steady profits, especially when other costs are not going anywhere. Margin repair comes first, not discounts. This is where 3 common myths trip people up. Myth 1: shipping is most of what you pay. In reality, it is a small fraction, buried under bigger expenses like labor and rent. Myth 2: lower shipping means instant price drops. Contracts and inventory delays mean savings can take months to appear if they show up at all. Myth 3: falling freight guarantees lower prices. Other costs can keep rising and retailers move at their own pace. Lower freight is not guaranteed to become lower shelf prices. For those watching from home, a few signals cut through the noise. The Drewry World Container Index and the Freightos Baltic Index track weekly container prices. Steady declines suggest easing pressure. Sudden spikes warn of trouble. West Coast port volumes show whether demand is building or fading. Port volumes rising can mean restocking pressure. Volumes falling can mean weaker demand. When big carriers like Maersk warn about overcapacity, it is another sign that shipping relief may be sticking around. Put simply, cheaper ocean freight helps, but it is only one input. Contracts, inventories, and other costs decide how fast and how much those savings reach your cart. Today, lower shipping rates aren't a guarantee of lower prices. They are a new test of how competition, contracts, and strategy shape what we pay. As supply chains speed up and margins shift, the pressure for real price relief builds. The next move belongs to the companies, not the containers.